I recently made a nautical-inspired leather sheath for a marlinspike and rigging knife. If you're not familiar with a marlinspike and a rigging knife, these are the two primary tools used by old-time sailors to cut and splice rope and tie knots. I designed this leather sheath to hold both the tools so that they're easily accessible, even if you need to make a quick repair high aloft in the rigging of a tall ship. I decided to tool the image of a ship on the front panel of the sheath. I used a modeling tool to sculpt the ship in low relief into the wet leather. Once the leather dries, the image will remain permanently in place. I based this image off of the Lady Washington, which is a reconstructed brig, or a two-masted wooden square-rigged vessel that sails out of Grays Harbor Historic Seaport in Washington State. It's important to do this tooling and sculpting early on in the sheath-making process so that the leather is still flat. This way I can put the leather flat on a hard surface and make deeper, more precise marks with my modeling tool. Once the image is complete, then it's time to move on to the rest of the sheath construction. For this sheath, I'm adding liners of a thin, vegetable-tanned leather. The liners add rigidity to the sheath and also ensure a snug fit that will last for a long time. The liner also allows me to use a copper rivet to fix the belt loop in place without worrying that the head of the rivet might scratch or otherwise damage the knife when it's in the sheath. Adding liners takes a considerable amount of time compared to a single-ply leather sheath, but I think it's worth it for the added protection and the extra snug fit. After checking to make sure that the knife fits in the leather spacers that I glued on, now it's time to fully assemble the sheath and glue it all together. Once the glue is set, then I can grind the edges flush and smooth. And then it's time for stitching. I tool a groove on both the back and front so that I know exactly where the stitches are supposed to go, and then I stitch each stitch individually by hand. This technique of sewing is called saddle stitching, and it uses two needles that go back and forth and leaves an extra strong seam. Then it's time to burnish the edges with beeswax to make them smooth and shiny. I use a dowel clamped in my lathe to help speed up the burnishing process, and then I finish it by rubbing by hand with a piece of denim. Then it's time to test it out and see how it works. Both the knife and the marlinspike seem to fit snugly, and here it is after a little oil.